Kraus. All right. You want to introduce yourself real briefly?
I'm Bob Kraus. It's spelled Krause, and I'm running to defeat Charles Grassley. I'm from Northwest Iowa originally, raised on a farm up there. We still have it. It's a Century Farm. I've done many things in my life. I've been a state legislator. If you see the disabled and senior vans that drive around the city, that was one of my bills when I was in the legislature. I was named by the Des Moines Register as one of the top 10 most effective state legislators at that time. I left to run for treasurer of state. It was a very bad year. I didn't make it, and nobody else did either. After that, I ultimately wound up in the Carter administration. I was regional head of the DOT, US DOT, during the Rock Island and Milwaukee bankruptcies. And I was in charge of the 22 states where those railroads were in to try to maintain service and create a strategy to keep those out of government hands and in the private sector. And we were successful with that. You have a railroad here in Des Moines, thanks to that. You have railroads across the state that are still there because of the things we did when I was in the Carter administration. I've also ran a think tank, a national think tank called the Center for Transportation at the Council of State Governments. I wrote a book on highway safety, and the main recommendation was enacted by Congress. I was a planner for the Iowa DOT. I've also have 28 years in the National Guard and the Army Reserve. And today I am an activist for veterans causes. You may have seen some of the stuff we've put out. Most recently, we were able to get the admission denial information from the Iowa Veterans Home. We had the Dean of the Department of Political Science did a statistical assessment for us. This is from Iowa State. And we discovered that there was age discrimination against the younger veterans. It's illegal, and we found it, and we're promoting that. But I've been an activist all my life. I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe that you believe that too. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. So my first question, you have a long record of public service that dates back to the 1970s and have campaigned extensively at party meetings and events around Iowa. However, you also did that in 2010 when you ran for the Senate. That year, you didn't raise a whole lot of money and received about 13% of the vote in the primary against a better funded and more well-known candidate in Roxanne Conlon. This year, you're also overmatched when it comes to funds and up against some better known candidates. For folks who really want their vote to have an impact, how do you convince them that you have a shot at winning, or that the issues that you're fighting for are important enough that folks should side with you to make that statement?
Well, I think in terms of issues, the central issue that I've been pushing is income inequality and wage stagnation. Way back in 2013, I was the first one to advocate going to the $15 an hour minimum wage. I was the first one in Iowa. And I pushed that consistently. If you look at my leaflet that I handed out, on there is something about the minimum wage. We need to create that as a floor because it will raise all other wages in this state. We've got 42% of our children in this state, 73% in Des Moines, are on the free and reduced lunch program. And the Department of Education, the Iowa Department of Education, has determined that those children score 20 points less on their standardized tests. Their IQs go down by 13% on a permanent basis. I think that many of the issues that we talk about are critically important. We have to talk about water quality. We have to talk about women's rights. We have to talk about minority rights. We have to talk about global warming. We have to talk about many issues. But I feel that the first thing on the plate has to be incomes, because incomes govern everything else. If you're too poor, you're not going to be even focused on it. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? How many have heard of that one? Just about everybody. It's one of those sociology 101s. Remember what happens when you're at the bottom? You're constantly working on survival. When we have our low information voters that we complain about in the Democratic Party because we have so many of them. They're low information voters because they're in a survival mode. We have to elevate them financially to get them out of the survival mode so they'll even pay attention to the problems that we have. That is the number one thing. And I think to flip it on the other side, what has Grassley done on that? He's opposed to